Thank you for listening to Let's Talk About Pain. Don't hesitate to subscribe so you don't miss an episode and to share the podcast with your friends. For more information, visit our website at qprn.ca or our YouTube channel by searching Quebec Pain Research Network. See you next time.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this special episode of Let's Talk About Pain. My name is Nathan, and I come from Belgium. I studied physiotherapy in Glasgow before moving to Montreal to undertake a PhD at McGill University. And I gradually became interested in the area of chronic pain management when I was studying in Glasgow, actually. I realized that things did not always line up between what I was taught in classes and what I saw during my stage. So that got me curious, and I fell into the rabbit hole of pain management. And one thing leading to another, I quickly realized the importance of high-quality education and training for future clinicians, but also that there was a big gap between what should be done and what was done in terms of training. I was quite lucky to find a PhD opportunity on this topic. And today we will be discussing my doctoral research project aimed at improving physiotherapy education in chronic pain management. This project has significant clinical implication as it seeks to optimize the skills of physiotherapists to better treat chronic pain in their patients. I'm pleased to have with me Lesley, an expert patient partner who has played a key role in this project. Lesley is also a physiotherapist and teaches chronic pain management to clinicians at McGill. Lesley, you have been really involved in research projects over the last 10 years, if not more. And you recently received the Leadership Award from the Canadian Pain Society. Congrats again for that. I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and briefly explain your role in this research.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Nathan. I am Lesley Singer, a patient partner with the Chronic Pain Network. And I am a physiotherapist as well, and I am an educator in the Certificate for Chronic Pain Management at McGill. My role in this project is to bring the voice of the person with lived experience into the education of physiotherapists in pain management. So what my role was looking at the competencies required for entry to practice physiotherapists in the management of chronic pain. And we are now looking at the ways education reflects the needs recommended by people living with chronic pain. So my role is to include the patient partner in educating future clinicians to bring a patient perspective to the research.
That's really interesting. And could you tell us a bit more about your journey with chronic pain and how did you come to collaborate with us on this research?
Okay, I have been living with chronic pain for 22 years now, and it started with a resection of a brain tumor, a non-cancerous brain tumor in my brainstem, and radiation treatment, and that was followed with chronic hemifacial pain, which was quite severe and hard to manage. And so my role as a clinician became very difficult to continue because of the constant jabbing of electrical pain in my face. And so I decided I couldn't continue in that demand as a physiotherapist, as a clinician. And so I left my job, went back to school, and pursued an interest in finding out what really was chronic pain, who were these patients that presented with chronic pain, and why did it present the way it did. So I went back to school, got my master's degree, and I was looking at outcome measures in chronic pain management. And then when I graduated, we were looking at starting a certificate to improve the pain management strategies that clinicians would have. And so I became a part of the steering committee to create this certificate. And at the same time as that, I met Dr. Weidman, who started at McGill, and he was working in pain management. And so our interests were very, very similar because I was looking at how can we make clinicians' knowledge better, and he was looking at how can we make the knowledge better for students who would be entry to practice clinicians. And so I started to work with him. And of course, Nathan, you worked with Dr. Weidman as well. And so I got involved with the two of you. And we were looking at the competencies required for entry to practice physiotherapists. So it was really, really very compatible with what I wanted to achieve. And so that's how I became involved with this project.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story and how you came to collaborate with us. I was wondering if you could also share a few examples of the different contributions you've had with the projects around my thesis.
Okay, the one that I remember the most was when Lynn Cooper and myself were the patient partners in your project. And we were part of the steering committee to do a Delphi procedure to find out what the competencies were that were required by entry to practice physiotherapists. And so Lynn and myself looked at the complete process, how the competencies would reflect patient-centered care, how we felt the competencies aligned with what we were looking for as people living with chronic pain when we went to see a physiotherapist. And so that was mostly our role with this project. We were completely part of the team in all aspects of that Delphi project, going back and forth with the educators and seeing their comments on the different competencies and coming to the conclusion of actually having the competencies required.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and your input, you and Lynn, has been really, really useful. So thanks again for this contribution. I was curious to hear your thoughts about how have you experienced this collaboration so far?
Well, I'm really happy to say that the collaboration has been tremendous. From the start, Lynn and I were included as part of the team. We were on every email about the project. We received any information, whether it had to do with the lived experience or not, so that we would always be kept abreast of what was happening. We were never looked at as inferior members of the team. We always had our comments. And for me, I often comment after a meeting. And so I may not comment on the spot, but I had the opportunity to be able to send an email later and send my input, which was always taken seriously, was always considered. I felt really an equal part of the team. So collaboration was right on. It was great.
I'm glad to hear, and it's really important for us to see that every member of the team is treated as equal. So I'm glad to hear that was your experience as well with that. What are your expectations for the future of this research, and what impacts do you hope to have on chronic pain management?
My expectations are have already actually begun to take place because we've looked at, now that we have competencies, how can we look at evaluating these competencies? What do students have in relation to these competencies and what do they need? And so we are looking at all the universities and have them evaluate their competencies. And I've been greatly involved with this, getting the patient perspective on the evaluation process. And so I expect that would be completed. And then each university can have some time to think about how they are doing with respect to the competencies. And if they are not up to what is expected, then they can look at their program. They can look at how can we get the students to achieve these competencies before they graduate. And so looking forward, I see this as a new way to educate, because people living with pain will be involved in the education, in deciding on material and actually the implementation of the material. So actually meeting with students. And we've begun to do this, and it's showing great promise. And so I see this as a way we are going to involve the lived experience in the education process, have students learn to listen to people who have chronic pain, learn not to judge that, learn to evaluate it, work with people. And so I foresee this as a great change in the education process.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that being able to put face on kind of complex terms like chronic pain or CRPS or things like this really helps for students to develop some empathy and understand that in the end it's just a person in front of you and you're trying to help them rather than a really complex condition. So this is really, really helpful. I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Yes, so am I. And I think being a physiotherapist as well as an educator, I combine my roles, and I really foresee this as a change that will come and be implemented and be accepted.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, so that's enough from my perspective. Nathan, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts about your research and our collaboration. Could you explain why the research is important for physiotherapists, for students, and for people living with pain?
Yeah, so first of all, with regards to the collaboration, I really want to basically restate the same thing you said, where we have been really appreciating your input as people living with pain, as a person, as a researcher in this process. It has been tremendous to have such a varied input in this process. And I think that the impact of this research is really important for different reasons. If we look at the level of the person living with pain, we know that currently they're not getting adequate pain management, unfortunately. As a whole, and it's not just physiotherapy, it's not just Canada, pretty much every country does not have adequate pain management. So if we can improve the skills of the future healthcare providers, then we can improve the quality of life, the treatment that people receive across the country and beyond. So it's really exciting for people living with pain, but I hope that in a few years they start receiving better care for pain management. For students, we know that they tend to be unsure about pain management because it's seen as this complex thing that we don't really have a good answer for. So when they end up in practice, of the time, they don't feel that they have the skill set to deal with that. And unfortunately, this can lead to personal issues like burning out. You don't feel like you have the adequate skill set to help people. You can have this empathy burnout where you just don't demonstrate empathy at all. And this reflects in the care that people receive as well. So think about students and, more importantly, future clinicians. If we can help them better understand pain and have strategies that they can use, I think that's a big win for them and for the patients again.
Yeah, good thoughts there. What are the main results you expect from the research, and how do you envision the practical application in the clinical settings?
Yeah, so my thesis research has 4 kind of different projects. So the first one, you briefly mentioned it earlier, was the development of competencies in pain management. So the idea behind this project was to have some kind of objective to achieve as programs. This is our goal. We want students to be able to do all these competencies when they finish training. At entry level, of course, at different levels, but this is the idea of giving us direction. And so that was really important because without clear direction, it's hard to move forward. So by doing this and getting most of the PD programs in Canada, getting people living with pain, getting educators, getting students on board, and agreeing together on this is what we should do was a really big first step. This led us to the second and third project, which led us to develop a tool to measure competency and an understanding of the current curriculum. So we wanted to be able to measure how do students perform on these competencies and what are the programs currently teaching in regards to those competencies. And again, the idea behind this is to be able to highlight areas that might need some additional work, or areas that actually people are doing really well on and want to celebrate that as well. And through that process, and by involving most programs in the country, we can really get a sense of community where people can learn from each other, inspire each other, and get together to tackle this big issue of pain management education. The fourth and final project, which is currently ongoing, is going to be looking at the barriers and facilitators to implementation. So we want to understand what are the factors that can help or hinder the implementation of this common goal. And based on that, we'll be able to have specific strategies to help every program achieve this common goal that we share of better pain education for physiotherapy students.
Okay, now how has the collaboration with patient partners like myself influenced your research? And what do you think have been the main benefits?
I think you touched on a bit earlier, and I want to restate the importance of having the perspective of people that have lived experience is crucial in research. And I think every single research project should have a patient partner on board. It really is something that you cannot access without the lived experience to get an insight. What is it like really? And this can really help inform what you do in research, because then you have this aspect of relevance. It's not, oh, we think maybe that this could help. You're like, no, people are telling us this would help me. And so I think that's really powerful. If we want to have a concrete example, I think that your perspective and Lynn's perspective in the first project, the competency profile project, really help us divide it into two categories. So we had the first one, which was the technical competencies of doing an assessment, doing a treatment. And then we had this key second format here of interpersonal competencies. So we really put this in two different categories so that we could really put emphasis on those competencies, being able to communicate, being able to demonstrate empathy, are crucial for pain management. And I think that without your input, it would have been hard to have this clear distinction and relative importance of the competencies.
Wow, that's powerful. What are your future plans for the research, and how do you plan to continue integrating the patient partners into your work?
Yeah, so the next steps would be, once we have a better understanding of the different factors that can contribute or kind of slow down the implementation, the idea would be to use that to then select the best strategies to assist people to do it. And I think that patient partners are really key in this step because they can really help with the kind of granular aspect of things. If we think about the competencies as a whole, it might be easy to have this as a guide for a program. But what about the content? What about the strategies for teaching, for evaluating? And I think people need to have some resources. And this is where people living with pain can really put their hand up and say, hey, I'm happy to help with this aspect. I can provide important information here. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, having people with lived experience integrated in the education process is crucial to help people realize, okay, this is a person I'm talking to. This is their experience. This is why it's important to demonstrate empathy, and this is how I can do it in a meaningful way. So this is how I see next steps of the research, but also the integration of patient partners in the process. So I think that summarizes our discussion together. To summarize the few key points. So you initially started by sharing a bit your story and how you came to contribute with Dr. Tim Weidman on his numerous projects. And you highlighted your different contributions to these research projects as an equal partner in the research team. And I think that was really powerful for us to hear that. Then I chatted a bit about the different thesis projects that I'm currently working on and how your input as a patient partner has really helped to shape their trajectory. And then we had a look at the next steps. And hopefully there's a brighter future for clinicians, for students, and for people living with pain thanks to some of this research. Thank you very much, Lesley, for your valuable contribution and for sharing your experience with us. It is a pleasure working with you, and I really encourage other research teams to seek help from patient partners to enrich their research projects. I wanted to thank our audience for listening to this new episode of Let's Talk About Pain, and stay tuned. Thanks again, Lesley.
Let's Talk About Pain, a podcast from the Quebec Pain Research Network. In each episode, we discuss the latest advances in pain research with guests from across Quebec in the health and research communities. Enjoy your listening.